The Iconians were doomed. These dying insectoid aliens had only a year left before their entire species would be extinct, their bodies ravaged by a horrific oxygen-choking disease. But all was not lost for the once mighty Iconian civilization. Humanity was coming to save them. Henry Simpson, human explorer and xenobiologist, stepped out of his shuttle onto the purple-hued grass of planet Iconia. The dry, crisp air filled his lungs as he surveyed the crumbling ruins of what were once great Iconian cities glittering under the orange sun. Now the only movement came from a procession of hunched, gasping Iconians shuffling into a dilapidated research center. Their carapaces were dull, and their compound eyes glazed. The mysterious disease was rotting them from the inside, decaying their unique oxygen processing organs until they drowned on dry land. Simpson stood witness to the death of an entire species, but this was a death he aimed to prevent. Inside the research center, he knew an Iconian scientist named Juno was working desperately to cure the disease before it claimed the last of his kind. Simpson had come to help, to leverage all of Earth's resources to rescue this civilization from the brink, for the Iconians had knowledge and technology that could propel humanity forward by centuries. The United Earth Space Agency saw the salvation of the Iconians as a chance to gain a powerful ally in the stars. But not everyone believed the dying Iconians were worth saving. As Simpson entered the lab and greeted an exhausted Juno, Dr. Ethan Reeves was disembarking a second human shuttle. Reeves was a renowned scientist in his own right, and had long been Simpson's bitter rival. He considered this mission a waste of UESA resources. The two men were instantly at odds, clashing over the value of this dwindling species. Neither knew then just how high the stakes would soon become. For as they began to unravel the secrets of the Iconian biology and the torturous disease, they discovered it could jump species and spread to human lungs, an apocalyptic plague in waiting. Now, saving the Iconians was not just about compassion or gaining an ally, but staving off a pandemic that could wipe out humanity itself. Simpson and Juno had to find a cure as a world of tension and mistrust between human and Iconian threatened to boil over. The fate of two species hung on their success in this rich yet deadly alien realm. The clock was ticking for the Iconians, and now for humanity too. As Henry pored over the Iconian database late into the night, his eyes growing bleary from exhaustion, a pattern began to emerge from the seemingly random strings of data. Hidden beneath layers of encryption, he uncovered a chilling truth. The disease ravaging the Iconians was no mere quirk of evolution, but a carefully engineered bioweapon. The implications hit him like a punch to the gut. This was genocide, plain and simple. And the perpetrators, according to the data, were none other than the Zorgons, a species he knew all too well from his xenobiology studies. Technologically advanced and notoriously aggressive, the Zorgons had a long history of conflict with the Iconians. Henry burst into Juno's lab, startling the Iconian scientist from his work. "Juno, you need to see this," Henry said, his voice tight with urgency. He brought up the decrypted files on Juno's holographic display. Juno's compound eyes widened as he processed the information. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. The Zorgons. But why would they? No, of course. They have always viewed us as a threat to their dominance. Henry nodded grimly. It seems they've finally found a way to eliminate that threat. They presented their findings to the Iconian leadership, who reacted with a mixture of shock and outrage. In a rasping voice, one of the elders revealed that the Zorgons had tried to subjugate the Iconians in the past, but were repelled by the Iconians' superior technology and alliances with other peaceful races. Clearly, the Zorgons had resorted to cowardly, underhanded tactics to achieve their goals. A fire burned in Henry's chest, a fierce drive to bring the Zorgons to justice and secure a cure for the Iconians. He couldn't let an entire species be wiped out by such cruelty. "We need to infiltrate a Zorgon research facility," he declared to Juno and the Iconian Council. "Steal their bioweapon data, find out if they have an antidote. It's the only way." Juno stepped forward, his carapace glinting under the light. I will come with you. My knowledge of Zorgon technology and language will be invaluable. But as they laid out their plan, Dr. Reeves barged into the council chamber, his face twisted with disapproval. "Absolutely not," he shouted. "This is too risky, Simpson. You could jeopardize the entire operation here. We should focus on finding a cure with our own research, not go picking a fight with the Zorgons." Henry rounded on his rival, his fists clenched. "And how long will that take, Reeves? Months? Years? The Iconians are dying now. We have to act." "This isn't your call to make," Reeves snarled. "You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. What about your loyalty to the UESA?" The accusation stung, but Henry brushed it aside. He knew in his heart that this was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. As the argument reached a fever pitch, Henry and Juno slipped away to begin their preparations in secret. They gathered a small, trusted team of Iconian operatives and managed to acquire a stealth spacecraft from the Iconians' dwindling fleet, one that could evade Zorgon detection. But even as they readied for their covert mission, the situation on Iconia deteriorated rapidly. More and more Iconians succumbed to the bioweapon each day, their gasping breaths echoing through the ruins of their cities. The government was in chaos, barely able to maintain order. Time was running out. With heavy hearts but unwavering tenacity, Henry and Juno boarded their spacecraft and set off into the vast expanse of space. Ahead lay Zorgon territory, a dangerous, uncharted realm where they would be alone and hunted. But they had no choice. The fate of the Iconians, and perhaps the future of human-Iconian relations, depended on the success of their desperate mission. They would have to navigate not only the external threats of the Zorgons, but also the tensions and conflicts within their own team. The weight of their personal sacrifices hung heavy on their shoulders. As the stealth ship sliced through the starry void towards the heart of Zorgon space, Henry looked over at Juno, seeing his own unwavering grit reflected in the Iconian's eyes. There could be no turning back now. For better or worse, they were committed to this path, a path that could lead to salvation or destruction for both their species. The victory over the Iconian plague was short-lived. As the last of the infected Iconians recovered, alarms blared across the planet. Long-range scanners picked up a massive fleet entering the system. The Zorgons were coming. Henry stood in the Iconian war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the incoming armada. His stomach dropped as he took in the sheer number of enemy ships. "They're not happy we ruined their bioweapon," Juno clicked, his mandibles twitching nervously. Before Henry could respond, a new hologram flickered to life. "Admiral Jackson of the USA. We've dispatched our fleet to assist. ETA 6 hours. Hold tight." The next days were a blur of frantic preparation. Henry found himself thrust into the role of liaison, coordinating between human and Iconian forces. He raced from briefing to briefing, relaying critical information on Zorgon tactics and Iconian defenses. In a cavernous hangar, Iconian scientists swarmed over human ships, integrating their advanced cloaking tech. Sparks flew as they worked, the air thick with urgency. "This better work," Henry muttered, watching a frigate shimmer into invisibility. Admiral Jackson's fleet arrived just as the Zorgon armada entered orbit. The human ships took up defensive positions around Iconia, their hulls gleaming in the orange sunlight. On the bridge of Jackson's flagship, Henry stood at a console, relaying orders to the Iconian vessels. The plan was in motion, a series of hit-and-run attacks to draw the Zorgons into position. Iconian squadrons Alpha and Beta engaged targets on my mark, Henry called out. On the main view screen, cloaked Iconian ships decloaked and opened fire, their energy weapons slicing through Zorgon shields. The bridge rocked as return fire struck their shields. Henry gripped his console, shouting coordinates as the battle raged. Explosions bloomed silently in space as ships on both sides were torn apart. For a moment it seemed to be working. The Zorgons were falling back, drawn into the trap. Then a massive shape emerged from the enemy fleet, the Zorgon flagship. Evasive maneuver. Admiral Jackson's order was cut short as a barrage of plasma torpedoes slammed into the ship. Klaxons blared as systems failed across the board. A hull breach tore through the bridge, and Henry was thrown to the floor. He dragged himself to his feet, smoke and sparks filling the air. Jackson lay motionless nearby. With a surge of adrenaline, Henry grabbed the ship's controls. "This is Henry Simpson. All hands, abandon ship," he called over the comms. "I'm taking us in." Henry fired up the engines, aiming the crippled vessel straight at the Zorgan flagship. Warning messages flashed across every screen as he pushed the reactor to overload. The last thing Henry saw before impact was a blinding flash as the electromagnetic pulse erupted, engulfing both ships. Then darkness. He awoke in a medical bay surrounded by beeping machines. An Iconian doctor bent over him, compound eyes gleaming. "The hero awakens," the doctor said. "You'll be pleased to know your gambit worked. The Zorgans have agreed to a ceasefire." Henry tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "And the others?" "Many were lost, but thanks to you, many more were saved." In the days that followed, as Henry recovered, he witnessed the birth of a new era. Human and Iconian leaders signed treaties of alliance and cooperation. Talk of joint scientific ventures filled the airwaves. As he watched an Iconian child playing with a human one in a newly rebuilt park, Henry allowed himself a small smile. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in ages, the future looked bright. Henry Simpson stood before the gleaming array of holographic displays in the Iconian Research Center, his eyes scanning the streams of data flowing across the screens. The air hummed with the soft whir of advanced machinery and the occasional clicks and chirps of Iconian scientists at work. "Incredible," Henry murmured, reaching out to manipulate a 3D model of an Iconian propulsion system. "The efficiency of this design is off the charts." An Iconian scientist named Krell stepped up beside him, mandibles twitching in what Henry had come to recognize as a gesture of pride. "Our antimatter containment field allows for a 97% conversion rate," Krell explained. "Your fusion drives barely scratch 40%. Henry nodded, absorbing the information. As lead liaison for the UESA, he spent his days immersed in a flood of new technologies and scientific breakthroughs. It was exhilarating and overwhelming in equal measure. A sudden tremor shook the facility, knocking tools off workbenches and sending researchers stumbling. Alarms blared as emergency lights bathed the lab in an eerie red glow. "What was that?" Henry shouted over the din. Krell's compound eyes darted to a nearby console. "Explosion in Sector 7, the quantum entanglement array." Henry's blood ran cold. That array was a linchpin of their joint communications network. As he raced toward the damaged sector, his mind churned with suspicion. This was no accident. Hours later, Henry sat in Admiral Jackson's office aboard the UESA flagship, his face grim as he delivered his report. "This is the third act of sabotage this month," Henry said, sliding a datapad across the desk. "And I've confirmed that critical propulsion data was stolen from our lab on Iconia." Jackson's weathered face hardened as he scrolled through the information. "You think it's the Zorgons?" "A rogue faction, at least," Henry replied. "Our peace is built on sand, Admiral. We need to—" A priority alert flashed on Jackson's screen, cutting him off. The Admiral's eyes widened as he read the incoming message. "We've got a bigger problem," Jackson said, his voice tight. "Our surveillance team just uncovered something. The Zorgons have schematics for an experimental Iconian warp drive." Henry leaned forward, his heart pounding. "That's impossible. That technology is decades away from—" "It's real," Jackson interrupted. "And they're building it. If they succeed, they'll have the ability to strike anywhere in the galaxy before we can even react." The implications hit Henry like a punch to the gut. Everything they'd worked for, the alliance, the peace, it could all be undone in an instant. Jackson stood, his face set with commitment. "We need a strike team. Fast, quiet, and lethal. Think you're up for it, Simpson?" Henry nodded, pushing aside his exhaustion. "Who's going with me?" "An Iconian commander named Zira," Jackson replied. "She's the best they've got. You leave in 6 hours." As Henry strode out of the office to prepare, he felt the weight of two worlds settling on his shoulders. The fate of the human-Iconian alliance now rested on the success of this mission. The strike team's stealth ship cut silently through the inky blackness of space, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Zorgan sensors. Henry sat at the helm, his hands steady on the controls as he navigated through a treacherous field of asteroids. Beside him, Zira's multifaceted eyes scanned the readouts. Zorgon patrol ship at bearing 047, she clicked, her translator converting the sounds to crisp English. Adjusting course to avoid detection. Henry nodded, easing the ship into the shadow of a massive asteroid. They'd spent days evading Zorgan forces, inching ever closer to their target, a hidden base where General Vrax and his loyalists were constructing the stolen warp drive. As they approached the base, nestled in the crater of a desolate moon, Henry felt a familiar tension coiling in his gut. He'd led dangerous missions before, but never with stakes this high. "Remember," he said to the assembled strike team, "a mix of human special forces and Iconian elite guards. Our primary objective is to destroy that warp drive. Everything else is secondary." They breached the base's outer defenses with surprising ease, using stolen access codes to bypass security systems. But as they penetrated deeper into the facility, alarms began to blare. "They're on to us," Zira shouted as blaster fire erupted from a side corridor. Henry ducked behind a bulkhead, returning fire with his plasma rifle. The air crackled with energy bolts as human, Iconian, and Zorgan weapons discharged in a cacophony of destruction. "Push forward," Henry ordered, leading a charge down the corridor. They fought their way through waves of Zorgon defenders, the mixed human-Iconian team displaying a synergy born of their newfound alliance. Finally, they reached the heart of the base, a cavernous chamber housing the partially constructed warp drive. Henry's eyes widened at the sight of the massive device, its intricate components pulsing with an otherworldly energy. "Set the charges," he commanded, gesturing to the demolitions expert. "We need to make sure nothing survives." As the team worked to plant explosives, a fresh wave of Zorgon troops poured into the chamber. Henry found himself back-to-back with Zira, their weapons blazing in unison. "Got your 6, Zira clicked, her carapace deflecting a blaster bolt meant for Henry's head. "Charges set," the demo expert shouted. 2 minutes to detonation." Henry barked the order to fall back, but as they retreated, a lucky shot caught him in the leg. He stumbled, crying out in pain as he fell. Zira was at his side in an instant, hauling him to his feet. "I've got you," she said, supporting his weight as they limped toward the exit. But the Zorgan forces were closing in, cutting off their escape route. Henry could see the agonizing decision in Zira's compound eyes. "Go," he gasped, pushing her away. "Get the team out. I'll hold them off." Zira hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "It has been an honor, Henry Simpson," she said, before turning to the team. "Fall back to the ship. Move." As Zira led the strike team to safety, Henry propped himself against a wall, his plasma rifle raised. He fired shot after shot, holding the Zorgans at bay as the seconds ticked down. The last thing Henry saw before the world exploded in white was Zira's ship streaking away to safety. Then the charges detonated, and everything went dark. Henry awoke to the sterile white of a medical bay, the steady beep of monitors filling his ears. Admiral Jackson stood at his bedside, a rare smile on his grizzled face. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Simpson," Jackson said. "You did it. The warp drive is destroyed, and Vrax's forces are in disarray." Henry tried to sit up, wincing at the pain that lanced through his body. "Zira?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Jackson's smile faded. "She didn't make it. Stayed behind to make sure the rest of the team got out. Her sacrifice saved a lot of lives." Henry closed his eyes, feeling the weight of loss settle over him. Another Iconian friend, gone. But as he processed the grief, he realized that Zira's actions had done more than just save lives. They had cemented the bond between their species. In the days that followed, as Henry slowly recovered, he witnessed a new era dawning. The UESA and Iconian government worked tirelessly to root out the remaining Zorgon loyalists and strengthen their alliance. New defense pacts were signed, joint military exercises were planned, and the exchange of technology and knowledge accelerated. As he watched a news broadcast showing human and Iconian diplomats shaking hands, or in the Iconians' case, touching antennae, Henry felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time, he truly believed that their two species could forge a lasting peace. Henry Simpson stood at the viewport of Sanctuary Station, watching as the massive structure took shape against the backdrop of stars. The gleaming spires and curving bioorganic walls blended human and Iconian design into a harmonious whole. He felt a surge of pride at what they'd accomplished, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. A series of explosions rocked the station, shattering the peaceful moment. Henry sprinted to the command center, barking orders into his comm unit. "Status report!" "Sabotage in Sector 7, an Iconian technician replied, her multifaceted eyes scanning multiple displays. "Zorgon sympathizers, security teams are in pursuit." Henry gritted his teeth. Another setback. The attacks were growing bolder, more frequent. He turned to his Iconian counterpart, Chief Engineer Krell. "How bad is it?" Krell's mandibles clicked in frustration. "We've lost a week's worth of work, and our reserves of duranium are dangerously low. Without it, we can't complete the outer hull." Henry ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. They needed a solution. Fast. The success of Sanctuary Station was critical to cementing the human-Iconian alliance. Days later, Henry stood before Admiral Jackson and the Iconian High Council, laying out his plan. "There's a system deep in uncharted space, rich in resources including duranium. If we can secure those materials, we can finish Sanctuary Station and make it impregnable to further attacks." Jackson leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "It's a big risk, Simpson. We'd be stretching our forces thin." "Which is why I'm proposing a small elite strike team," Henry countered. "In and out before anyone knows we're there." The Iconian counselor Vexala raised a feeler. "And who would lead this expedition?" Henry straightened. "I would, sir, along with your best operatives." After hours of debate, the mission was greenlit. Henry wasted no time assembling his team. Human Special Forces veterans, Iconian stealth experts, and a few trusted allies from past battles against the Zorgons. Their ship, a prototype stealth vessel, slipped silently through the inky void of uncharted space. Henry stood at the helm, eyes fixed on the sensors as they navigated a treacherous asteroid field. "Contact!" shouted Zephyr, the Iconian warrior who served as his second-in-command. "Alien raiders, bearing Eero 47. Henry's hands flew over the controls, guiding the ship into the shadow of a massive asteroid. They held their breath as the raider vessel passed by, its sensors blind to their presence. Days of careful navigation brought them to their target, a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant. Scans confirmed rich veins of duranium and other critical resources beneath the cratered surface. As they established their base camp, Henry felt a prickle of unease. It had been too easy. He ordered extra security measures, a decision that would soon prove prescient. The attack came without warning. A swarm of Zorgon fighters screamed out of the planet's rings, weapons blazing. Henry shouted orders as he raced to the command post. "Shields up! Return fire!" The human Iconian team sprang into action. Plasma bolts and energy beams crisscrossed the sky as they fought off wave after wave of Zorgon attackers. Henry found himself back-to-back with Zephyr, their weapons working in perfect sync. An explosion rocked the ground, showering them with debris. "They're trying to flank us," Zephyr shouted. Henry nodded, tapping his comm unit. "Beta team, deploy the shield generators. Delta team, I want those ion cannons online now." As the battle raged, Henry caught a glimpse of the Zorgon commander, a scarred veteran he recognized as one of Rax's former lieutenants. Something about the precision of the attack nagged at him. "Zephyr," he called out between bursts of weapons fire, "this is too coordinated. The Zorgans shouldn't have these kinds of resources anymore. Zephyr's compound eyes narrowed. You think they have outside help? Before Henry could respond, a lucky shot from a Zorgon fighter struck their command post. Alarms blared as systems failed across the board. Fall back to secondary positions, Henry ordered. As they retreated, he and Zephyr exchanged a look. They needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. Hours later, as the last Zorgon fighter fell from the sky, Henry put his plan into action. They broadcast a false message, describing a massive cache of resources ripe for the taking. It was a gamble, but one they had to take. The trap was sprung with brutal efficiency. As the Zorgon forces rushed in, hungering for easy plunder, the human Iconian team unleashed hell. Coordinated strikes from hidden emplacements tore through the Zorgon ranks. Within minutes, it was over. In the aftermath, Henry and Zephyr interrogated the captured Zorgon commander. What they learned chilled them to the core. A rogue faction, the Zorgon spat, mandibles clicking in defiance. Within your precious Iconian government, they hired us to disrupt your alliance, to keep you weak and divided. Henry exchanged a troubled look with Zephyr. The implications were staggering. If word of this betrayal got out, it could shatter the fragile peace they'd worked so hard to build. As they prepared to return to Sanctuary Station with their hard-won resources, Henry and Zephyr faced an impossible choice. Confront the traitors and risk everything, or keep the secret and allow the conspiracy to fester in the shadows. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and the weight of that decision pressed down on Henry like a physical force as their ship lifted off from the battle-scarred moon. Henry stared out the viewport of Sanctuary Station, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the control panel. The massive structure hung in space, a testament to human and Iconian cooperation. But beneath the surface, a cancer grew. We can't tell anyone, he said, turning to Zephyr. The Iconian's compound eyes reflected the starlight, unreadable. Agreed, Zephyr clicked. The alliance is too fragile. We must handle this ourselves. They retreated to Henry's quarters, a Spartan room with little more than a bunk and a desk. Henry pulled out a secure datapad, fingers flying over the screen as he drafted a list of potential allies. We need people we can trust absolutely, he said. No room for error. Over the next few days, they carefully approached each candidate. A human engineer with a knack for decryption. An Iconian security officer who'd saved Henry's life in a previous battle. A logistics specialist who could track the flow of resources across both species' territories. As construction on Sanctuary Station continued, Henry implemented new security protocols. He stood in the main docking bay, watching as a shipment of duranium was unloaded. Run a full spectral analysis on every crate, he ordered. Any anomalies, no matter how small, I want to know about it. The station buzzed with activity, but Henry's mind was elsewhere. In a hidden lab deep within the structure, his team worked tirelessly to unravel the conspiracy. We've found something, the human engineer Sarah said one day. She pulled up a holographic display showing a web of financial transactions. There's a pattern here. Funds being funneled through shell companies, then vanishing off the grid. Henry leaned in, eyes narrowing. Can you trace it? Sarah shook her head. Not yet, but it's big. Whoever's behind this has deep pockets. Weeks passed. The station grew, but so did Henry's unease. He found himself jumping at shadows, scrutinizing every new face for signs of betrayal. Then came the breakthrough. Zephyr burst into Henry's quarters, mandibles clicking excitedly. We've intercepted a transmission, encrypted, but our team cracked it. There's a meeting happening tonight. Henry's pulse quickened. Where? An abandoned mining outpost on Iconia's third moon. It's perfect for a covert operation. Hours later, Henry crouched in the darkness of the outpost's main chamber, Zephyr at his side. Through a crack in the wall, they watched as a group of Iconians gathered around a holographic display. The humans have made us weak, one of them hissed. We must purge their influence before it's too late. Henry's fists clenched, but he forced himself to remain still. They needed proof, not just words. Suddenly, alarms blared. "Intruders detected," a voice shouted. "Move!" Henry yelled, bursting from their hiding spot. In the chaos that followed, they managed to subdue one of the conspirators, a high-ranking Iconian official. Back on Sanctuary Station, Henry paced as Zephyr interrogated the prisoner. Hours passed before the Iconian emerged. His exoskeleton slumped with exhaustion. "It's worse than we thought," Zephyr said. "They plan to overthrow the government, dissolve the alliance. They believe humans are a threat to Iconian independence." Henry sank into a chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "We can't let that happen. But if we move too soon—" "Civil war," Zephyr finished. They worked through the night, planning their next move. As dawn broke over the curve of Iconia, Henry stood at the viewport once more. Sanctuary Station loomed before him, nearly complete, a symbol of unity, now under threat from within. "We'll finish it," he said softly, "no matter what it takes." Henry Simpson stood in the command center of Sanctuary Station, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing Iconia's orbital defense platforms. The room buzzed with activity as human and Iconian officers worked side by side, their movements precise and coordinated. "Zephyr, what's our status?" Henry asked, his voice tight with tension. The Iconian warrior's compound eyes flickered as he processed incoming data. "Our intelligence is solid. Kaldor's forces are mobilizing. They'll strike the platforms within the hour." Henry nodded, his fists tight. "Then we move now. Alert the strike teams." Moments later, Henry and Zephyr led a joint task force of human and Iconian ships toward the defense platforms. As they approached, the vastness of space erupted into chaos. Enemy fighters swarmed from hidden positions, their weapons blazing. "Evasive maneuvers!" Henry barked into his comm. He gripped the controls of his ship, executing a tight barrel roll to avoid a barrage of plasma fire. Zephyr's voice crackled over the channel. "Henry, we're encountering heavy resistance on the eastern flank. They've fortified the main control hub." "Understood. Alpha team with me. We're punching through their lines." The battle raged across the void. Explosions blossomed silently in the vacuum, debris spinning away from shattered ships. Henry's strike team fought their way through the maelstrom, inching closer to the central platform. As they docked, Henry and Zephyr led the charge into the station's corridors. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the metallic halls. They rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a group of Iconian traitors. Henry ducked behind a bulkhead as energy bolts sizzled past. He leaned out, firing his pulse rifle in short, controlled bursts. 2 enemy combatants fell, their exoskeletons smoking. Zephyr moved with inhuman speed, his blade flashing as he engaged the remaining traitors in close combat. Within seconds, the hallway was clear. "This way," Zephyr clicked, his antennae twitching. "Kaldor's biosignature is emanating from the main control room." They burst into the chamber, weapons at the ready. Kaldor stood at the central console, his massive form dwarfing the other Iconians around him. "Ah, Henry Simpson," Kaldor's voice dripped with disdain. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." Henry kept his weapon trained on the rogue Iconian. "It's over, Kaldor. Surrender now." Kaldor laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "You fool. This is only the beginning. The Krylox will crush your pathetic alliance and—" His words were cut short as Henry fired, the energy bolt striking Kaldor's shoulder. The Iconian traitor stumbled, giving Zephyr the opening he needed to tackle him to the ground. In the ensuing struggle, Henry managed to subdue Kaldor, securing him with magna cuffs. As the remaining traitors were rounded up, Henry turned to Zephyr. "We need to get him back to Sanctuary Station. If what he said about the Krylox is true, we're in for one hell of a fight." Hours later, Henry and Zephyr stood in a secure briefing room aboard Sanctuary Station. The intelligence extracted from Kaldor was displayed on screens around them. "It's worse than we thought," Henry said, his voice grim. "The Krylox have an invasion fleet massing in the Theta sector. If they launch—" Zephyr's mandibles clicked in agitation. "We must strike first. A preemptive attack is our only chance." Henry nodded, already formulating a plan. Agreed. We'll need our best operatives. Stealth will be crucial. They spent the next several hours assembling their strike team, veteran soldiers from both species, each chosen for their unique skills and unwavering loyalty. As the team gathered in the hangar bay, Henry addressed them. What we're about to attempt is nothing short of impossible, but the fate of both our peoples hangs in the balance. We go in quiet, we hit them hard, and we come home. Any questions? Silence met his words. Each face, human and Iconian alike, showed only fierce. The years following the Krylox invasion had brought peace and prosperity to the human Iconian alliance. Sanctuary Station stood as a beacon of cooperation, its halls bustling with activity as members of both species worked side by side. Henry Simpson, his hair now streaked with gray, gazed out at the stars from the station's observation deck. A young Iconian officer burst through the door, his exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. Ambassador Simpson, we've detected an anomaly on long-range sensors. Henry turned, his eyes narrowing. Show me! In the command center, a massive holographic display flickered to life. A colossal object hurtled through space, its trajectory unmistakable. It's on a direct course for Iconia, Henry muttered, leaning in to study the readouts. What the hell is it? The Iconian High Council convened within the hour. Henry stood before them, outlining his plan for a diplomatic mission. We need to make contact before it reaches our system, he argued. If it's hostile, we need to know. If it's not, we may be dealing with a first contact scenario. As the envoy ship approached the massive vessel, Henry peered out the viewport. The alien craft dwarfed them, its hull pockmarked and scarred from countless impacts. This is Ambassador Henry Simpson of the Human Iconian Alliance. We come in peace and offer assistance if needed. Silence. Henry tried again, cycling through various frequencies and even attempting rudimentary mathematical sequences. Nothing. Sir, a human technician called out. I'm picking up some unusual readings. The ship, it's not powered for combat. It's some kind of arc? Detailed scans revealed the truth. Millions of life signs, all in stasis, and the ship's systems were failing rapidly. We can't let them die, Henry said, his voice firm. Prepare a rescue operation. I want engineers, medical teams, and a security detail. We're going aboard. The joint human-Iconian team worked frantically, struggling to interface with the alien technology. Henry moved through the cavernous halls of the Vrilix ship, surrounded by rows upon rows of stasis pods. Each contained a being unlike anything he'd ever seen, vaguely humanoid but with iridescent skin and multiple sets of eyes. Ambassador! An Iconian engineer called out. We've accessed some of their databanks. These beings, they're called the Vrilix. Their homeworld was destroyed. This ship was meant to find them a new home, but something went wrong. They've been adrift for centuries. Henry's mind raced. They couldn't possibly evacuate millions of beings in time. There had to be another way. Back on Sanctuary Station, he gathered the brightest minds from both species. We need a solution, people. How do we save an entire civilization? An Iconian scientist clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. What if we use Sanctuary Station itself? Its tractor beams and propulsion systems, if we could modify them. We could guide the ship to safety, Henry finished. But where? They pored over star charts, finally settling on an uninhabited moon in the Iconian system. It would be a monumental undertaking, but it was their only chance. As Sanctuary Station locked onto the massive Vrilix vessel, alarms blared. Unknown ships dropping out of FTL, a tactical officer shouted. They're powering weapons. Henry gritted his teeth. Defensive positions. We can't let them near the Vrilix ship. The space around them erupted in chaos. Energy beams lanced out from the attacking ships, slamming into their shields. Henry barked orders, coordinating the defense while simultaneously overseeing the delicate towing operation. We're losing our lock, an engineer shouted. The Vrilix ship is breaking up. Henry made a split-second decision. I'm going over there. We need to stabilize their systems from the inside. Donning an EVA suit, Henry led a team of engineers across the gap between the ships. They worked feverishly, rerouting power and patching critical systems as the battle raged around them. "Just a little more," Henry grunted, forcing a malfunctioning power coupling into place. The ship shuddered, then steadied. As they guided the Vrillix Ark to its new home, Henry allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew their work was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, waking an entire civilization and helping them build a new life among the stars. The years passed swiftly as the human Iconian Vrillix alliance flourished. Sanctuary Station buzzed with activity, its corridors filled with the diverse languages and cultures of 3 species working in harmony. Henry Simpson, his hair now silvered and his face etched with the lines of experience, stood at the viewport of the station's command center, gazing out at the stars. A young Vrillix officer approached, her iridescent skin shimmering under the artificial lights. "Ambassador Simpson, we've detected an anomaly in the Gamma sector." Henry turned, his eyes narrowing. "Show me." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a massive fleet of unknown ships advancing towards Alliance space. Henry's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the distinctive silhouettes of Naraketh warships. "Alert all Alliance leaders," he ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We need an emergency summit. Now." Within hours, the leaders of the human, Iconian, and Vrillix forces gathered in Sanctuary Station's war room. The atmosphere was tense as Henry laid out the dire intelligence. "The Naraketh have set their sights on our alliance," he explained, gesturing to the holographic display of the approaching armada. "Their force is unlike anything we've ever faced." An Iconian general clicked his mandibles in agitation. "We cannot hope to match their numbers or firepower." "Then we don't fight them head-on," Henry countered. He leaned forward, outlining his plan. "We use the Vrillix cloaking technology and Iconian stealth systems to set a trap, lure them into a system of our choosing, and hit them when they least expect it." The room erupted in heated debate as the Alliance leaders weighed the risks and potential consequences. Henry listened intently, addressing concerns and refining the strategy. Finally, a consensus was reached. "We have no choice," the Vrillix High Commander declared. "We must act now or face annihilation." As the Naraketh Armada approached, the Allied fleet took up positions in a remote star system. Sanctuary Station, repurposed as a mobile command center, hid behind a gas giant, shielded from enemy sensors. Henry stood on the bridge, surrounded by a hand-picked team of commanders from all 3 species. The tension was palpable as they watched the enemy fleet enter the system. "All ships maintain radio silence," Henry ordered. "Wait for my signal." The Naraketh ships moved deeper into the trap, their sensors blind to the cloaked Alliance vessels surrounding them. Henry's hand hovered over the command console, sweat beading on his brow. "Now!" he shouted. The space around the Naraketh fleet erupted in chaos as Allied ships decloaked, unleashing a devastating barrage of weapons fire. Energy beams lanced through the void, tearing into the surprised enemy vessels. "Press the attack!" Henry commanded. "Don't give them time to regroup!" The battle raged across the star system, a dizzying dance of explosions and weapons fire. Henry coordinated the assault from Sanctuary Station, his eyes darting between tactical displays and status reports. "Sir, the Naraketh flagship is holding position at the edge of the system," an Iconian officer reported. "Our forces can't break through their defenses." Henry's eyes hardened. He knew what had to be done. "Prepare a strike team. We're going to board that ship and take out their command structure." Minutes later, Henry led a mixed squad of human, Iconian, and Vrillix soldiers onto a stealth shuttle. As they approached the massive Naraketh flagship, Henry turned to his team. "We may not all make it back," he said, his voice solemn, "but what we do here today will echo through history. For our people, for our future, let's end this." The shuttle slipped through a gap in the flagship's shields, docking with a secondary airlock. As they breached the ship's interior, alarms blared. The squad fought their way through corridors filled with Naraketh troops, their advanced weaponry proving a match for the genetically enhanced warriors. They reached a massive blast door beyond which lay the ship's command center. As Henry worked to bypass the lock, a group of Narrakith elites ambushed them from a side passage. "Go!" Zephyr shouted, his blade flashing as he engaged the enemy. "I'll hold them off." Henry hesitated, torn between the mission and his oldest friend. Zephyr's compound eyes met his gaze. "Finish this, Henry. Whatever it takes." With a heavy heart, Henry led the remaining team members through the blast door, leaving Zephyr to his fate. The sounds of battle faded as they pressed deeper into the ship's heart. They burst into the command center, weapons blazing. The Narrakith commander, a towering figure with cold, calculating eyes, stood waiting. "Henry Simpson," the alien's voice resonated with cruel amusement. "I've been expecting you." Henry raised his weapon, his voice steady. "It's over. Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." The Narrakith commander laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Henry's spine. "You fool. This is only the beginning." In a blur of motion, the alien leader struck, his enhanced strength and speed catching Henry off guard. The human was sent flying across the room, his weapon clattering to the floor. Henry struggled to his feet, facing down the advancing Narrakith commander. He knew that the fate of the Alliance, of countless worlds, rested on the outcome of this confrontation. With Zephyr's sacrifice fresh in his mind, Henry steeled himself for the fight of his life. The two leaders clashed in a furious exchange of blows, each pushing their bodies to the limit. Henry's years of experience and human tenacity were put to the test against the Narrakith's genetic enhancements and advanced combat training. Blood trickled from a cut above Henry's eye as he ducked under a vicious swing, countering with a series of rapid strikes to the alien's midsection. The Narrakith commander staggered back, momentarily stunned. Seizing the opportunity, Henry lunged forward, driving his shoulder into the alien's chest. They crashed into a control panel, sparks flying as systems overloaded. The Narrakith commander's grip on Henry's throat tightened, darkness creeping into the edges of his vision. With his last ounce of strength, Henry reached for a jagged piece of debris, driving it deep into the alien's side. The Narrakith commander's eyes widened in shock, his grip loosening. Henry gasped for air, stumbling back as the alien leader collapsed. The room fell silent, save for the sound of Henry's ragged breathing. Forcing himself to move, Henry activated the ship's communication system. "This is Henry Simpson to all Narrakith forces. Your leader has fallen. Stand down immediately or face total annihilation." He watched through the viewport as the once mighty Narrakith fleet began to falter, their coordinated attacks dissolving into chaos. The Alliance ships pressed their advantage, tearing through the enemy's disorganized ranks. As the last Narrakith vessel retreated from the system, Henry sank to his knees, exhaustion and grief washing over him. The cost of victory had been high, too high. Zephyr's face flashed in his mind, along with countless others who had given their lives in this brutal conflict. The aftermath of the battle was a mixture of celebration and mourning. As the Alliance began the long process of rebuilding, Henry found himself unable to share in the joyous atmosphere. The weight of command, of the lives lost under his leadership, pressed down on him. In a quiet ceremony, attended only by a few close friends and colleagues, Henry officially stepped down from his position. He passed the torch to a new generation of leaders, confident in their ability to guide the Alliance through whatever challenges lay ahead. Days later, a small ship departed from Sanctuary Station, carrying Henry to a remote outpost on the fringes of known space. As the station receded into the distance, he took one last look at the home he had helped build and protect for so many years. The outpost was a simple structure, perched on a rocky planetoid with a breathtaking view of a nearby nebula. Henry spent his days in quiet contemplation, writing his memoirs and watching the stars wheel overhead. One evening, as the system's sun dipped below the horizon, Henry stood outside the outpost, his aged eyes fixed on the distant points of light. He thought of Zephyr, of all those who had fought and died to secure this peace. A sense of bittersweet pride filled him as he realized that their sacrifices had not been in vain. The alliance would endure, a testament to the strength that comes from unity and cooperation. As the first stars of evening appeared, Henry allowed himself a small smile. The future was in good hands, and the legacy of their struggles would light the way for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.